We're going to have a conversation about where Kenya lies in international relations and the importance of that, the decisions that are made on a global scale. The CEO of the Africa Policy Institute, Professor Peter Kagwanja, will join us just in a short while. But even as we do, just looking at some of the intrigues of things that are happening or continue to happen around the nation. Yes, we did discuss how you make the decisions that you make. What are some things that you should take into consideration when things are happening? Is it time for things to move differently? Who takes responsibility, or who should take responsibility when things start to go, in a direction where you were not really comfortable with? Who takes that responsibility? Who ensures that things being said are kept in check? When we talk about that, you set the tone from the top. When we talk about that, you take responsibility. If you are the one who sits in a position of authority over everybody, does the buck ultimately stop with you? Why then do you appoint people who
Where else could
over?
it stop if not you? Because we have an appointing authority in our country, it's the president.
Yes.
Some of these positions he appoints. So the buck has to stop with him, nobody else.
Yeah. Again, if you look at, let's just look at the structure of government. And when you talk about government, we have three arms of government: executive, National Assembly, and the legislature, and the judiciary. In each and every single department, the buck stops with the head of these departments. Because if someone says the judiciary has been captured, you have ceded your power. The buck stops with the Chief Justice. When you talk about the National Assembly, that you have been captured, National Assembly is an independent institution. The buck stops with. But then again, we will extrapolate that and get it back to the man at the top. If indeed he's captured these guys, he's still taking responsibility. They can't escape it.
When it comes to independent institutions, you're absolutely correct. The buck does stop with the individuals.
Yes.
Because the head of state's responsibilities with his cabinet, those are his people.
Yes.
As part of the executive. So yes.
Yes.
But if you had an independent institution, man, that buck stops with you.
With you.
You can say what you like, it stops with you. Yes.
Yeah.
If at the time of appointment you didn't understand what the word independence means, again, that's your problem. If you thought that by ascending that position that you have, that your job was to cede your power to the presidency or to the executive, that again is your problem. Yes. We will hold you responsible.
And let's even take it even further to each and every individual legislator that is out there and saying, I have to go to State House, I have to prostate for a road to be constructed. You have ceded your power.
Not only ceded your power, you see, this is, if you ask me, it's the left hand doing what the right hand knows it should do. Yeah. Because, yes, you cede power because there's something you hope to gain. You also understand that there is something to be gained by ceding power. And whatever you're gaining has very little to do with your constituency.
Yes.
Very, very little. Now, how then do you explain a situation where people are quick to blame the executive? I keep saying this and I'm going to continue repeating it. When they had the opportunity to make a different decision.
Yeah.
How then do you just keep pointing a finger at the president or the presidency? How?
So, but then the question is, you had the opportunity to make the decision. You had an opportunity to speak up. Why didn't you?
Yes.
Why? Why didn't you?
Suddenly, everything lands at the president's doorstep. There are many things that land at the president's doorstep, but not your personal decision. You are the one who makes that decision.
Yeah.
You make the decision to contest a certain post. You make the decision.
Yeah.
You make the decision to agree to have your independence influence. You agree. Yes. You can talk around it and give it all manner of meanings, but you agree. Yes. So at the end of the day, how then dare you complain and say it is somebody else when it is you who had the power to do whatever you needed to do and you didn't do it? Whose fault can it possibly be except your own?
I have been captured. Get out of here.
Well, you had a responsibility, didn't you? Okay, so we're looking at the place that Kenya has in international relations, and our guest for this hour is here, the CEO of the Africa Policy Institute, Professor Peter Kagwanja. Good morning.
Good morning, madam. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. How was your holiday?
Do you have time?
What does that?
Don't worry. Okay. Well, you're well, though?
Yes, I am. Under the circumstances. Yes.
Isn't that how the greetings have become nowadays? Under the circumstances, considering all things.
Yeah, all things being equal.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Welcome to the hot seat. A few minutes out of 9 o'clock, but it had you in a bit of a tailspin this morning.
How?
The timing was
the coming.
The coming.
First and foremost, you don't have a gate.
Let me tell you something. This thing was supposed to have been fixed by the 11th of November 2023.
Yes. So I come there, I can't even get through, but it's okay. And people are back to school. You're used to these empty roads now.
Everything is full.
It's full now.
And then on top of that, there's no gate. But here we are. So let's welcome you as you take a minute.
Thank you.
And CT is in Uganda this week. Well, he's here. We can see him. But the proverbs this week are from Uganda.
Oh.
And
what is his attraction there?
Maybe he can tell you.
I will tell you.
There's a couple of animals there, but maybe he can let you know what he's really after. And maybe you can tell us now how you'd interpret his proverb this week.
In case you didn't know, it's a bird watching haven. Now, the birds I refer to are the avian variety of birds, the ones which fly in the air. It is also the place where you will find tree climbing lions. And it is also the home of the majority of the world's mountain gorillas.
Okay. And it's also the home of Museveni.
It's also the home of Museveni. And there is no duplicate. It's one. It is one. Yoweri Museveni. The proverb. An elephant which kills a rat is not a hero.
Yes, you have to accomplish a feat that we can call a feat. In short, they normally say if you want really to make news, give a dog a good munch. Then you be in the news.
Yeah.
But if you just go shouting, the dog bites me, you are not the first one in history to have that kind of encounter with a dog. Yeah, many of us have had.
Yeah.
But tell me how you give a dog a good bite.
Yeah. And even better, the dog goes now complaining.
And then the dog
that
goes,
a human bit me.
Yeah, with the tail between its legs, running the fastest it can. Then you have a space in the news. I think that's really a small achievement that an elephant can always kill a rat. That's my interpretation. Unless you have a deeper metaphorical meaning.
No. Your interpretation is perfect.
Yeah.
Yes. Significance.
Indeed.
Yes.
You have to do something significant for it to be outstanding.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
If it isn't significant, how then can it be outstanding? Yes.
You can set that to my WhatsApp. So it's a good one. I can use it somewhere else.
Okay.
As long as you give me the copyright.
So speaking about significance and Kenya's place significantly in international relations, international politics, where we are now, and there are things happening within the country, there are things happening regionally, we know. We had a bit of is it a bit of a spat with Uganda and who was taken, who was not taken, and then now most recently had another one with somebody abducted in Kenya. What does that have to? Where are we contending with that? And then look at the global scale beyond the region. What's happening with Kenya and the African Union, for example? Where does Kenya sit in international relations today? And at this junction where we are, where there's so many things happening at the same time, we look at a global power, one of the greatest, the United States, going into a new presidency and a new administration, and Kenya is always asking its questions right now. The other day, the president, with the Los Angeles fires, offered Kenya's support to the United States, and said, anywhere where we can support you, we will do this. So there are many places where Kenya's significance is being looked at in the international relations scope. And what position Kenya holds, I think, is extremely important. But why is it important to look at that right now when so many things are happening regionally, so many things are happening, internationally and such?
Well, I think you are right that Kenya is a pivotal state. That's how the United States of America describes us, a pivotal state. In Africa, we claim the status of regional power. And in this region of the Horn of Africa, we have two major powers, which is Kenya and Ethiopia. And for us, I think we are really considered a soft power nation and a soft power regional power, if I can use that double language, meaning it's not largely our military prowess that counts in order to influence our neighbors, but our soft power. And therefore we have been a lead nation in IGAD. We have been a lead nation in East African Community. We are a lead nation in COMESA. And we have some status, I wouldn't call it observer status, but we're recognized even within SADC.
United Nations headquarters offices here?
Yes. Now, regionally, if we look at regionally, that's how we are considered. Then the other thing is when we come to the global south, we are a major player. We have not reached the level of South Africa. South Africa is now in the G20, we are not. South Africa is in the BRICS, we are not. But reasons can also be explained why that is the case. And then when we come globally, we're really talking about, the emerging nations. The World Bank ranks us as the lower middle income. By now, since we're approaching 2030, we should be a middle-income economy. So we are still there. Just a few years ago, we have been the United Nations Security Council, where we were quite vocal in many respects. And as you rightly put it, we are the capital of the United Nations in the global south. Apart from what is in the north, Geneva, if you wish, Rome and New York. Two United Nations, institutions are here. And word has it, I think this is just going to become public very, very soon, that Kenya is, in the Nairobi headquarters of the United Nations is going to have almost equal status as New York.
Yes.
And the reason is that the world is now beginning to become increasingly multipolar. And many powers would want to disinvest heavily from the United States as the lead nation in the United Nations. Sooner or later, the United States is not going to be the main contributor to the United Nations kitty. And that means that, power is diffused globally. And many powers can do that. And Kenya is one of the beneficiaries of that. That the headquarters, we are going to be genuinely a capital of the United Nations in the global south. But that said, I think we have a problem.
What's that?
Because the exercise of of diplomacy and international relations depends largely on a nation's capacity to project itself that. Remember, there are other bigger countries than Kenya. Nigeria, we have Egypt, we have Algeria, we have Democratic Republic of Congo is many times richer and larger than Kenya. Why does Kenya get the status of a regional power and the kind of, prestige and influence we have had globally? It is because of our diplomacy. And when you study our diplomacy from the 1960s, we became a very, very powerful. And the people put at the helm of our diplomacy, Munyo Wayaki, Robert Okoh, and so on, were really people who globally, who understand the nitty-gritties of diplomatic operations there. If you hear the story of how we got the United Nations here, then UNEP here, then you see how exquisite our diplomacy has been. As I speak, I would, without any fear of contradiction, say that our diplomacy is going down. It's diminishing.
Let's just, for the purposes of definition, so that we can understand very clearly, when you say that diplomacy is going down, we're looking at diplomacy where you talk about the relations with other nations, or are we talking about how then you're able to have conversations about things that should be established, traded, agreed upon, when we're talking about treaties and things like this?
First and foremost, there is something like what the African Union calls shared values. And as far as the shared values are concerned, it matters how you're seeing to follow those shared values. Africa is not very big in terms of democracy, but we have embraced the idea that we need to have democracy, and people are looking at how you're practicing. So in the past, Kenya has been held in very high esteem in terms of the way we are conducting ourselves. I think we would qualify ourselves to be the freest nation in this part of Africa. Ghana and others are considered equally free from the other side of the Atlantic side of Africa. I think this story about abduction is really bringing us down. It's just the other day, I think former Prime Minister Odinga goes to South Africa, and the journalist asks you if you're going to seeking this position in the African Union, and you are dead mute about abductions at home. What are you going to do about Africa globally? I mean, I think this was a very indicting statement. The other day we had this hurabaru of the simple interpretation of what diplomacy is about. The reciprocity of it became a big issue for discussion between us in the think tanks, and the foreign policy establishment in Kenya, because we're saying you cannot give Bill and Melinda Gates diplomatic immunity because they have nothing to give you in return, and already you have gazetted that you're giving them immunity. So they under pressure, they had to retract that. And I
hear what you're saying, Prof.
Yeah.
But diplomacy, in and of itself, is it must be activated.
Yes.
It does not. It's not a standalone idea.
Sure.
And when you see then diplomacy flourishing as an agent of international relations, it must be activated by people.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So are you saying now that diplomacy then has gone down because the people in its practice then have reduced in terms of the worth that they apply to it? And that diplomacy is not being practiced by professionals in the manner in which it was before? Because again, diplomacy, it would be sitting over here. But until you activate it is when you see that it is actually flourishing or not.
You can activate it, but do a lot of catwalking and refining your accents and everything else, rather than basically going to the substance of it. And let me put it this way. The mark of diplomatic success is the acclaim you get from your peers, from other nations. Now, Kenya is inherently described as a Pan-African nation. And therefore, on the basis of that, we have used Pan-Africanism even to defend our sovereignty. If you remember the debate about the International Criminal Court and the indictment of President William Ruto today and former President Uhuru Kenyatta and others, and the debacle we had with the ICC and why we defeated the ICC 10-0 is because of our prowess as a Pan-African nation, that the African Union stood up and said no. On behalf of Africa, and I was part of that process of getting the African Union to understand the predicament we were in at that time, and that was that literally showed the diplomatic muscle that Kenya had. But we had to move, as you rightly put it, we had to move from Nairobi to Addis Ababa. We had to move from Nairobi to Geneva. You moved from Nairobi to The Hague. You moved from Nairobi to New York, and lobby other governments.
Okay.
And you have also to make an argument that does not depict you as a rogue nation. You are not fighting to be a rogue nation. You're fighting to restate international law. And that is what really has won Kenya its reputation. Now, what is happening is that when you go to places, I mean, and I want to draw your attention to what happened when Nelson Mandela, one of the most elevated men, passed on, and there was his funeral or memorial, and you see Obama coming in, everybody coming in, and and Kenya goes in, and you see the Uhuru Kenyatta is there, and their cream that was given to Kenya at that time in South Africa left everybody with no doubt that Kenya is the lead Pan-African nation, and Uhuru Kenyatta is riding at the helm of that.
I almost hear you saying that has dropped significantly.
Now you go to Ghana. You go to Ghana. The inauguration of Mahama, and who is winning the crown? That Kenya is mentioned, and nobody even. Not even a crab. Then
certain Traore.
Traore comes and there's a deafening noise. What does that tell you? That we are not doing our part as a country, and we need to go back to the drawing board and see where did we drop the ball.
Some would argue that maybe the ball has not been dropped in the trenches, trying to build up and come back up. All right, let's see. The CEO of the Africa Policy Institute, Professor Peter Kagwanja, is our guest this hour. We're looking at Kenya's place in international relations and asking certain questions now about, okay, so what does the continent see, and how would it work if certain things changed on that level? And you say, okay, so when did the rain start beating us? Just giving that example of, Kenya saying, or you saying rather that, maybe lost some points in this diplomacy game. And what would then be the thing that would bring Kenya back to that glory status?
Now, let's first of all look at why, we would say that Kenya has dropped the ball diplomatically. First, the key word in diplomacy is strategy. Remember, diplomacy is not that soft game. It's a very hard game, but with, very, very well, calibrated gloves. So that this is one of the professions where somebody will tell my friend Muga, go to hell. And Muga, wait anxiously for that trip. And he want to go to it. Because of the way language,
the way in which you
the way it's put, the way it was positioned and all, you look forward to the trip. And why I say so? Because strategy becomes so important in terms of knowing how to deal with your challenges or enemies if you have, and how to gain, how to maintain your friends in a certain way, because you need them tomorrow for a certain vote, and also to know the pits on your path. The pitfalls that can be there within that terrain. So let's be a little bit more concrete on Kenya.
Yes.
Most countries in the world, particularly the global south, are gravitating towards the concept of global south and to the emerging new multilateral organizations of the global south. Then you become reluctant to even attend. Forget about joining the BRICS. Which has over 50% of the world petroleum and the petroleum trade, which has, you can mention anything. It's even population of the world is within that BRIC, and when it is holding its conference or summit in Johannesburg, you don't go. And the person will go, of course, the foreign minister, and this is a meeting attended by the president of China and others. But you see, the problem, the immediate impact is not that China gets angry or other powers get angry because you missed. It is South Africa because you have eroded the solidarity that you had. And what does that mean? When you come to the African Union, you have lost your power because South Africa carries with it 16 countries in the SADC region, right? So strategically, just by missing one meeting, you lose 16 potential votes that Uhuru Kenyatta was enjoying.
Is it guaranteed? Is it guaranteed that you lose them? Because is it guaranteed that you lose those votes by virtue of not, rubbing shoulders with folks at that particular meeting?
No, not that particular meeting. It is the interlinkages in diplomacy and your interests, because diplomacy is essentially about your state interests and how they are navigated. It's not about much how you project your power. But it's more about how you negotiate and navigate the space in order to defend today and tomorrow your interests. I was giving an example. Now, in the record debate here, it is ideologically it's important to know whether you want to go to the BRICS or not. Because if you are in bed or in good books with America, and you are seen as the blue-eyed boy of the United States, it doesn't go well for you to shine in the BRICS meeting.
Exactly.
Yes. So you want to play a role key. But even then, you want to show that you're very, very good, and therefore you don't go to BRICS. And what does that mean for you? It means that the host of the BRICS is not China.
Yeah.
It is South Africa. And therefore, South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, will take that you snapped him. This was his day to shine.
So how we look at it later is that at the moment, we can ground this, can't we, Prof?
Yes.
So in the moment when you do go to Ramaphosa and you say, you know what, here I am as Kenya, or in this case, in the person of Raila Odinga, who's gunning for the AUC chair, but I haven't rubbed shoulders with you previously in a space where I should have. Am I essentially letting you know that, well, maybe I'm not really interested in frolicking with you at that level? And so the resultant effect of that is that the likelihood of me giving you my support, me and my 16 other bedfellows over here, then reduces significantly.
Yes, that's what we are saying, that in diplomacy, it's not a game of today. Diplomacy is not a sprint, it's a long game. So when we send our troops to Namibia during their independence, and we are the people who, however, the outcome of it is that you now can just take your bags and jump into the plane and go to Namibia. And you don't need the visa to go to that country. The same case with Zimbabwe, because in the 1979-1980, we read the troops for the liberation of Zimbabwe. In the sense that we were the peacekeepers in that country, the lead. And that means we have invested in that. So I wanted to look at the long term, that diplomacy is a long game rather than a short game. And therefore, the failure to attend the BRIC summit, the last BRIC summit in South Africa, is making it very difficult for us to persuade South Africa to vote for Raila Odinga in Addis Ababa.
Well, when you look at it like
it's
that,
haunting us many years after.
But if you go with that argument, what we speak about a few minutes ago when you said, look, if your intent strategically, diplomatically, in the world of geopolitics is for you to be seen as the blue-eyed boy of powers such as the United States, then maybe the strategy of the country then is not to be associated with BRICS at this point, because that now takes greater priority on the totem pole of geopolitics.
And that is where
But then again, that is where now the long nature of diplomacy comes in. You take that step. And yet again, somewhere along the line, you have an individual in the country, a very prominent individual, who wants to be a huge figure in the African Union. And you do need the support of these countries, many of whom and that BRICS coalition.
So my question is, what takes precedent over the other? Do you look at your regional play? Because here we are, when we've previously said that Kenya held a position where you travel around the continent, for example, and you're lauded for your position, right? And here is a significant move that would bring Kenya back in the person of the chairperson of the AUC. If you sat in that position, no doubt that you're going to get some brownie points on the African scale, right? I mean, it goes without saying. But at the same time, and what you need to do again is frolic with your brothers and sisters in the region, in the name of BRICS, right?
Yes.
But how does that play against what has been your practice in the last 9 months, for example, when you offer support to Haiti at the request of the United States, when you offer support to the United States by establishing businesses here, when you offer immunity to one of the biggest companies, to individuals from one of the biggest companies in the world in the name of Microsoft? How does that play one against the other?
That is where what has made us a power? In fact, that's where we should have started. What makes us a great power are the strategic choices that we made, particularly in the 1960s and 1970s, and which were amplified by Daniel Moi later on. One is what we call strategic neutrality. Strategic neutrality. You are not for or against the West. You are not for or against the East. You are only interested in your interest, in yourself. And now how you navigate that space is your business. Now, and we navigated that space that way. And that's why the world had no problems, have us having the UN headquarters here. And you can see a small country like Geneva, Switzerland. And why Geneva has become the country, the city that it is now. It is because Switzerland strategically chose a certain way of doing things. It's in Europe, but does not agree with the policies collectively that are made by Europe. Does not agree with them, but is not party to them as the conveyors of its own interest. So in Kenya, we defined ourselves as regionally East Africans. And we today carry an East African passport. That's what we are traveling on.
Yes.
We can be nationalistic, be Kenyans, and say we're not going to carry a passport that can also carried by South Sudan, is also carried by one of the second poorest countries in the world, which is Burundi, and so on and so forth. But we understand that we are part of this region. So that's where Pan-Africanism starts. Then you move to the African Union space and say we are Africans. And you write these beautiful narratives that we are co-founders of modern Pan-Africanism, because Jomo Kenyatta was somewhere in Manchester and was one of the conveners of that conference, which defined the future of the African continent. That's a narrative that you get your scholars to speak about, to write about, and to go on. So long term. Then it is from that point now that you start to define your globalism. How do you interact with the global or the world and the rest of humanity? And that's where the game is. Why? Because the game there is not about your identity per se. It's more ideological, whether you are with us or against us.
Whereas I understand that there's a place every nation will play in geopolitics, especially if you want to remain significant. There are concurrent conversations that are happening about the position that Africa needs to take, and that the support for Africa needs to come primarily from African nations.
Yes.
Does one take precedence over the other? That can you actually fight for the dominance that you feel Africa should take as an African nation today with power? Or should you insist on the position that you as a single country then will take when it concerns global power? How do you play one today?
That's where the problem is, because if the African, let's say the African Union, or the main powers or influencers of African diplomacy take a certain position, and you take a position that is contrary to that, that's where you find yourself in a very hot soup. Why? Because African diplomacy is very consultative. Remember, if you are mapping ideologies globally, you start with Asia, who are about harmony. You can be different, but you have to sing the same tune, harmony. Here in Africa, our traditional philosophy is absolute consensus. You have to agree so that you move together. And that's what is eating us as Kenyans. In terms of this power sharing and all. Because even though you will invest so much in democracy, at the end of the day, you have to move together as a nation. And that means the opposition is usually not very much elevated, which is Western idea of conflict as the motor of development. So the West has no problem with having another power you're fighting with, because that's the way they think. But the rest of the world has a problem with that. Now, two issues have divided the world today. One is Ukraine. The other one is the Palestinian question, the ongoing war in Gaza and the Palestinian territories. Now, how have those two defined Kenya? Yes, because that's where you stand up to be counted. What is Africa's position? Africa's position is with Palestine, largely, and without any contradiction. And by the position you have taken, you will be rated on the continent, because more than 50% of the countries on the African continent are Muslims, Muslim countries, with sympathies to Palestine. Take the whole of Arab Maghreb, in northern Kenya, northern Africa, you come to Egypt or the Sudan and part of South Sudan, Somalia here, and virtually the whole of West Africa, including the mighty Nigeria. So just that choice of the statement or opposition you take, overtly or covertly, on that question defines whether you have the true north in regard to your diplomacy with the rest of Africa.
But let me ask this question then. There is a role that is played by a policy that identifies a leader in a country or a president.
Yes.
So if we were to look at the the pursuit of the AUC chair by Raila Odinga, would you then say that direct support of the president would help in his bid, or will it damn his bid?
I will not fall to a trap, Muga.
You've seen him.
I've seen you from, as they say, 18. In other words, you're asking me, and I refuse to answer that question, whether, President William Ruto's support of Raila Odinga is a boon or a bane.
Let me tell you why I'm asking the question.
Yes.
If Kenya as a country has been what it is,
yes.
Are we therefore saying that the choices that the current president now makes damns us, so that everything else that we've represented before is no longer significant?
Yes. That's essential when we're talking about the practice of diplomacy today.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's no doubt about it that the position we have taken very, very much the United States. And remember, we are coming back, because after Trump, we are not sure that we are anymore in the good books, because Trump has changed the game.
Yes,
and now, if you look at it, and I want to dare say this, that we as a country are divided on some of these issues. If you ask the millennials and the Gen Z who their candidate is, they are likely to tell you that Trump is the best thing that has happened to humanity since the creation of Adam. The Gen
Yes.
Z.
But there's something else that I want to mention here. You see, if I get it right,
yes.
And this one I stand to be corrected. When people vote in the AUC, they or in the African Union, they vote as directed by their presidents, or whoever it is who is the leadership, the people who represent us there.
No. The vote for Raila Odinga is very serious, because it is only heads of state who vote.
It's only heads of
state. Let me start with what I've said. If the AUC is voting,
yes,
do the presidents individually vote, or do they have nominees who vote on behalf of the country?
The president vote directly, and if you are not present in Addis Ababa, you cannot send a representative to vote on your behalf. If you are not there, your vote is lost.
Okay. So the presidents
themselves vote. And this is something my friend Muga have said before, and I want to repeat it here. And I know it's a very costly statement. But sometimes as an intellectual, you have to stand straight. First, Kenya, again talking about the strategy, Kenya goofed. And I don't know how they got the old man, the former prime minister, to agree. Because...
To do what?
To agree to be a candidate.
Okay.
How they got him to agree to be a candidate is what I cannot fathom.
Why?
Because the average age of an African is 19.2 years. That's the average age of an African. The average age of an African president today is about 60 years, right? Now, if you add the years of the 91-year-old Paul Biya and Ouattara and others, then you get it to 63 years old. That's the average. Now, the African Union in February will be hiring a CEO. The person who pushes the files, who pushes policy, and so on. It will also be doing something else. It will be nominating or electing the president of the African Union. Right? So there'll be two elections not elections, but going side by side. The president and the CEO. Now, you have Traore, you have the Senegalese leader, you have Mahamat Debi, all in their 40s, and they are seated there, right? And you want to hire a CEO who is 80 years, a CEO for equity? Now, just get to think about how.
Why do you ask this question?
Yeah.
Is the concern, is the concern about his age and what he'll be? Or is the concern about who then he would represent? If we're looking at the average age of the continent being at 19.2.
No,
what's the issue here?
Even there are two issues here. One is whether or not these 54 or 55 heads of nations will be willing to have an 80-year-old person as their CEO. I'm not talking about their president, because the president can be Paul Biya or anybody, because that holds a meeting once a year or twice a year.
So what the question still remains the same.
Yes.
So what would their concern be?
The concern
as
is
they're voting. Are they saying that he doesn't represent the age,
not just,
or that he himself as an individual doesn't have the girth because of his age?
It's whether you fit the bill, whether you fit the job.
But is that really what is a consideration for this post when people vote?
Yes.
Are you saying that foreign powers like, say, France would not wade into this and support somebody who they feel is more francophone than right?
No, we are going to look at many factors. I've just given you one factor, which cuts across the continent, and which is not about Raila failing. Is how Kenya will fail Raila by getting him to something which does not fit him and his gravitas. Because he's more gravitas than just... If he was going for the president of the African Union, where you go and grace the occasion like he was the chair or the lead of the infrastructure. That's it. Nobody would have issues. But I have personally been with the AU from 2001. And I remember the debate we had about removing Salim Ahmed Salim of Tanzania, who was the Secretary General of the OAU, and why we need to reconfigure that particular position. And we have had two debates. The first debate was we need somebody more elevated than Salim Ahmed Salim, who will be a peer to the presidents when they meet. Because at that level, it's just president, not even vice president or foreign ministers. It's just the president. So they need peerage. And at the same time, they say, we also need somebody who can serve for this particular period. They limited it to 8 years. And they fell on the Malian president who had just retired, Alpha Konare. Konare was 54, if I can remember, 54, 58. And he fitted the bill. He served one term. But when he was in office, he behaved in a certain manner and looked like he's not just a peer, but he's greater than the others. So, I mean, and they had a problem with that because he has a jet, he has everything, and so on. So
those are things to all be considered, and sadly our time has come to an end. But looking at Kenya's place in all of this, I think is vitally important for you to come back and for us to continue this conversation.
Yes, I think so.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.